She was on her knees in the
Help,
dry
please!
grass, clutching the fence post like it was the only thing still holding her to this world. Her dress was torn down the side. Dirt had been ground into the fabric like the land itself had tried to claim her. Her breathing came in short, broken gasps, sharp little sounds that didn't belong to romance or weakness, only pain. Blood smeared her forearm where the barbed wire had bitten deep. And behind her, a man more than twice her age knelt close, steadying her with one hand at her side, holding the torn fabric away from the wound, trying to see what damage the fall had done. From a distance, it looked wrong. It looked like the kind of scene that makes riders stop, stare, and reach for their guns. The girl turned her head just enough for her voice to crack. "I've been aching down there," she whispered, barely louder than the wind. The moment the words left her mouth, Silus Mercer froze, not because of shame, not because of desire, but because he knew exactly how that sentence could sound to anyone watching from the road. He loosened his grip on the fabric and spoke low, steady, the way you talk to a spooked horse. "Easy," he said, "don't move yet." The girl swallowed hard and pointed with shaking fingers. "Right here," she added, touching the side of her hip. "It hurts bad," and only then did the picture change. Only then did the truth settle in. This wasn't a man taking advantage of a helpless girl. This was a rancher trying to keep a stranger from bleeding into the dirt. Her name was Clara Whitfield. She was 23 years old, fresh off a stagecoach, and she had fallen hard against Silus Mercer's fence less than an hour after arriving at his ranch. But the way she fell, that was the part that didn't sit right with him. The land that doesn't apologize, the Arizona sun beat down without mercy. Summer out here didn't care about apologies or second chances. The grass was brittle, the ground packed like iron, and the barbed wire stretched on forever, humming softly in the heat. Clara had insisted on helping. That was her first mistake. She didn't want to look like some mail-order bride who'd sit inside and wait to be fed. She wanted to prove she could stand in the real world, this hard world, beside a man like Silus. So she walked a few steps ahead of him along the fence line. Boots new. Eyes not yet trained for the traps a lifetime out here teaches you to see. Then her foot caught, not on loose dirt, not on a rock. On wire that had been pulled tighter than the rest. She went down sideways, fast and hard, her body twisting as the barbs tore cloth and skin. Her hips slammed into the earth with a dull sound that made Silus swear under his breath. Now she knelt there shaking, pain burning deep in the bone where it didn't show easy on the surface. That kind of ache didn't fade quick. That kind of ache stayed with you. Silus checked her the only way a man like him knew how, careful hands, no rush, no nonsense. The dress was torn clean where the wire had grabbed it. The skin beneath was already swelling, darkening under his fingers. A bad bruise at best, a cracked bone if luck had turned against her. He reached out to steady her, and that was the moment anyone watching could have gotten the wrong idea. And someone had been watching. The feeling of eyes that don't belong. Silus felt it before he saw it. That old prickle between the shoulders that doesn't come from heat or pain. The feeling you get when eyes are on you and they don't belong there. He glanced down the fence line toward the open land beyond his property. Nothing moved. No rider, no dust trail, but the wire near Clara's boot told a different story. This section didn't match the rest. The tension was wrong, too tight, and there, half hidden by grass, was a fresh knot where the wire had been joined. New, careless. Silas's jaw set hard. This hadn't been an accident. He eased Clara away from the fence and helped her sit back on her heels. "You stay still," he said. "I'll get you water." Clara nodded, teeth clenched, pride fighting pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Silus looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't dressed like a woman trying to tempt fate. She was dressed like someone who traveled too far, trusted too much, and landed in a place that didn't forgive either. "You didn't cause this," Silus said quietly. "Someone else did." He fetched his canteen and held it while she drank. Her hands trembled so hard water spilled down her chin. That's when he noticed the scrap of fabric caught on the barb. Not hers, darker, heavier, men's cloth. Silus took it loose and folded it into his palm without a word. Out here, people didn't usually set traps for women. They set them to send messages, and this message had been aimed at him. Silus didn't say it out loud, but his eyes moved the way a man reads a map. The knot was fresh. The grass around it was crushed in one direction only. Whoever did it stood on the outside of the fence, not a drifter passing through. Not a hungry kid looking for work. Someone who knew exactly where Silus would walk and exactly where a new bride would step without looking. Silus felt his stomach go cold, because that kind of planning wasn't meant to scare a girl. It was meant to make a man make a mistake. And out here, one mistake didn't just cost pride, it cost blood. The house, the bruise, and the rider on the hill. Silus didn't rush her into the saddle. A hip injury could turn a ride into something worse, so he walked her slow toward the house, one careful step at a time. The ranch house wasn't much, one story, weathered boards, a porch that had seen more dust than visitors. But it stood solid, and right then, solid was all that mattered. He settled her near the window where the breeze could find her, brought water, cloth, and a tin of liniment that smelled sharp enough to wake the dead. As he set the tin down, he noticed something on her boot. A thin strand of wire, finer than fence wire, curled like a hook. He lifted it with 2 fingers, held it to the light, not his. This was tagging wire, quickwork wire. The kind men carry when they don't want to be seen doing it. Clara saw his face change. "Why?" she asked. "What is it?" Silas set it down, voice calm. "Nothing you did." Then he looked past her, out the window, as if glass could show the future. "Just proof," he said. "This started before you ever got off that stagecoach." Outside, the horse shifted, then went still. Animals go quiet when something's wrong. Silas looked out without moving the curtain much. Far off near the rise where the road bent toward Hullbrook, a rider paused, too distant for a face, not too distant to watch. The rider stayed long enough to be sure Silas noticed, then turned and drifted away like smoke. Clara followed his gaze and felt the room turn colder. "If you're listening, stay with me before we go further. Let me step out of the dust for a moment and speak plain. What you're hearing has been gathered, reshaped, and told again to bring out the lesson buried inside it. Some details are adjusted so the meaning lands clearer and the warning travels farther. And every visual scene you see in these stories is created with the help of AI, not to deceive, but to help you feel what words alone sometimes can't carry. If you're still here, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. And if you want more stories like this, consider subscribing. No pressure, just a way to make sure the next story finds you when you're ready, because this story, it's only just beginning. Town of Hullbrook, and the deputy with clean boots a little later. Once the worst shaking passed, Silas hitched the wagon. Clara needed salve, proper bandages, town supplies. Hullbrook came into view slow, like towns always do. Few buildings, a wide street, people who looked like they were watching everything, even when they pretended not to. Eyes turned when they saw them, a gray-haired rancher, a young woman sitting stiff beside him. Some looks carried curiosity. Some carried judgment, and then there was Deputy Wade Kellen. He stepped out from the shade like he'd been waiting, clean shirt, easy smile, a man who enjoyed being recognized. "Well now," Wade said. "Looks like Silus Mercer finally decided to bring company to town." Clara shifted, uncomfortable. Silas stayed still. "Just getting supplies," he said. Wade's eyes lingered a second too long on Clara. "You all right, miss?" Clara answered before Silas could. "I took a fall." Wade chuckled like that explained everything. "Land does that." Silas watched him close. The deputy's boots were clean. Too clean for a man who claimed to patrol all day. They finished quick: medicine, bandages, quiet whispers from folks once they thought no one was listening. On the way back to the wagon, Clara reached into her satchel. She hesitated, then pulled out a sealed envelope. "I was told not to give you this until I was sure," she said. Silas took it but didn't open it. "Sure of what?" he asked. "That you were the kind of man who wouldn't ask for something just because he could." Silas nodded once. That night the ranch didn't sleep easy. Wind rattled boards, the horse stamped once in the dark, and somewhere beyond the fence line, a rider passed slow enough to listen. Silas sat at the table with the envelope in front of him. He turned it once, then twice. Finally, he slid it into his pocket unopened. Some things were better faced when your hands were steady. The next morning, 3 BOOTPRINTS and 4 riders' morning came dry and already hot. Silas was up before the sun cleared the low hills. Habit did that, so did worry. He walked the fence line alone, not to fix anything, just to read it. A fence tells a story if you let it, where it sags, where it's too tight, where hands have been that don't belong. About 50 yards from where Clara fell, he found it again, the same careless knot, the same fresh scrape on the post, and boot prints, not ranch boots, city-made hard soles, at least 3 men. Silas straightened, scanning the land wide open. No cover worth mentioning. Whoever set the trap hadn't been hiding. They'd been sending a message. By mid-morning, dust showed on the road. Riders, 4 of them, they didn't come fast. They came like they had a right to be there. Silas waited by the fence, hands loose at his sides. No gun drawn, no hurry. The lead rider tipped his hat without warmth. "Morning," Silas nodded. "Road runs past here," Silas said. "You missed it." The men laughed like it was friendly, like it was nothing. One of them shrugged. "Horse threw a shoe. Thought we might water up." Silas looked past them to the trough. "You should keep riding." The laughter stopped. That's when one stepped too close, just enough to test. Silus didn't swing wide, he stepped in short and hard. The man went down choking on dust and surprise. The rest moved then fast and sloppy, no dance to it. Just weight, balance, and knowing where to put your hands. One grabbed Silus from behind and learned quick that age doesn't mean weak. An elbow found ribs, a heel found a foot. Clara watched from the porch, heart hammering. One man circled wide, trying to get behind Silus. Her hip still burned, so she couldn't run, but she could help. She grabbed a handful of gravel from a tin near the steps and flung it hard. It didn't land like a miracle, it stung eyes. Made a man blink and turn his head, and that was all Silus needed. Silus drove him back into the fence post. Wood and wire did the work with him. Even so, a fist clipped Silus high on the shoulder. His face tightened with real pain. He didn't look like a young man winning. He looked like an older man surviving. Dust hung in the air. Men groaned on the ground. Silus stood breathing heavy but steady. He rolled his shoulder once. Clara saw it cost him. He looked at her. Not angry, just serious. "Go inside," he said. The men scrambled up, pride hurt worse than bodies. The lead rider spat. "This land won't be yours long." Silus stepped closer until the man could smell him. "You tell whoever sent you," Silus said, voice calm as a coffin lid, "that next time I won't be this patient." They rode off hard. Silus walked the fence again after they were gone. One of them had dropped something. A small metal clamp, scuffed and bent, not ranch gear, railroad issue. Silus turned it in his hand, jaw tight. This was bigger than he'd hoped. Clara came out slow, leaning on the door frame. "You didn't start that," she said. Silus shook his head. "No," he said, "but it started now." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the scrap of fabric she'd taken from the wire the day before. "One of them," she said. "The one who didn't talk much. That's his." Silus took it. Same color, same weight, proof stacks quiet. The envelope OPNS, and a name stops his heart that night. The air stayed thick like it was holding its breath. Silus slept light, half-dressed, boots close enough to reach without looking. Years ago, he promised himself he'd never sleep like that again. Promises change when trouble comes knocking. He sat at the table with the envelope again. Turning it like it might bite, he told himself he'd wait, but his hands moved anyway. He broke the seal just enough to slide one page out. Only one: names, dates, payments. A list written plain like a man keeping accounts. Halfway down, one name stopped him cold. Wade Kellen. Silus didn't curse, didn't panic. He just remembered the last time a lawman tried to take something from his land and what he'd done to stop it. He pushed the paper back inside, pressed the envelope flat, and sat in the dark until the lamp burned low. When the knock finally came, he was already standing. Protective custody. Just before dawn, the knock hit the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Not the knock of a neighbor, not the knock of a friend. Silus opened the door to find Deputy Wade Kellen standing there with two men behind him, both strangers, both quiet. "Morning," Wade said. "Smile easy, too easy." "We had a little incident," Wade said. "Figured I should check in." Silus stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "Check what?" Wade glanced past him toward the window. "Your guest," Wade said. "She might be safer in town for a bit." Silus knew those words. He'd used them himself once back when he still believed the law meant protection. "She stays here," Silus said. Wade's smile thinned. "This isn't a request," Wade said. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and held it up like scripture. "Protective custody," he said. "Witness to violence, I'm responsible." Silus stepped closer until Wade had to look up at him. "You step past that line," Silus said, "and you're taking her over my dead body." One of Wade's men shifted a shotgun just enough to be understood. Wade didn't flinch. "That's exactly what I'm trying to prevent." Silus looked at the two men behind Wade. Neither met his eyes. "You don't need help," Silus said. "You need permission." Wade's smile turned thinner still. "You always were sharp," Wade said. "That's why this has to be done proper." Then he raised his voice just enough to carry through the door. "Miss Whitfield, best you come with us." The door opened a crack. Clara stood pale but steady, hip wrapped tight, eyes clear. She looked from the paper to the shotgun, then to Silus. She saw what the town would call it if blood spilled on his porch. She swallowed once and lifted her chin. "I'll go," she said. "But mark my words, Deputy. I'll be telling what I know and what I've seen to anyone who will listen. Not because I trust him," she added, eyes on Wade, "but because I won't have men dying over me today." Silus's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. He gave one tight nod, the kind that says, "I understand, but I don't accept." Wade nodded like a man who'd won a small bet. "Neither do we," he said. "They took her without touching her. That was the trick of it. Everything looked clean." Lawful. Silus watched the wagon roll away until the dust settled, then stood there long after, because he knew something had shifted, and the town wasn't ready for what came next. The post in the middle of town by midday, Hullbrook knew. People always did. They knew Clara was taken for her own good. They knew Silus fought men at his fence. They knew something was moving under the surface, and most of them didn't like it. Silus rode into town slow, no hurry. No gun on display. He tied his horse and walked straight to the notice post where lost stock, church meetings, and warnings went up. People watched from doorways, windows, behind barrels and counters. Silus carried the bent rail clamp in one hand and the scrap of cloth in the other. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He drove a nail into the post and hung the clamp where everyone could see it, then the cloth. This was cut, he said, voice carrying without effort. This was tied wrong. Men shifted. Women looked away. Silus continued. This is how traps get set, he said. Not by accidents, by hands. Someone muttered it was none of his business. Silus turned slow. It became my business when it nearly broke a young woman's hip. He stepped back and let the object speak. That was the moment fear crept in, not loud, not sudden. Fear like the first drop of rain that tells you a storm is already on its way. From the far end of the street, Harlon Voss appeared, well-dressed, calm, surrounded by men who didn't look nervous at all. Silus, Voss said, spreading his hands like a show. Silus met his eyes. I'm making a point. Voss smiled for the crowd. Land disputes happen, he said. Fences get adjusted. Water gets shared. Not like this, Silus said. Voss stepped closer, voice dropping. You're a smart man, he said, smart enough to know when to stop. Silus didn't answer. He didn't have to. The rope warning by evening the town was restless. Doors closed early. Voices dropped low. And just after dark, someone screamed. They found a rope hanging from a beam near the livery. Empty, swaying, a warning without a body. No note, no explanation. Everyone understood. Silus stood at the edge of the crowd, jaw tight. He didn't need to ask who did it. Back in the small room where Clara was being kept, she sat alone on a narrow bed. Deputy Wade stood outside her door, humming to himself. Clara pulled the letter from her bag and read it again. Names, dates, payments, and one line that made her breath catch. Wade Kellen. Outside, the town held its breath. Silus looked at the empty rope and knew the line had been crossed. The next move wouldn't belong to the men who set traps in the dark. It would belong to the man who was done being tested. The water is the heart. The rope was gone by morning, cut down clean like it never existed. But fear stayed. Silus rode out before the sun climbed high. Didn't tell anyone where he was going. Men who explain themselves too much rarely get anything done. The trail toward the high ground was dry and narrow. This time of year, water meant everything. And anyone who controlled it controlled the land around it. Silus reached a shallow basin tucked against the edge of the painted desert. Not much to look at unless you were thirsty. That's when he saw the new fence, fresh posts, wire pulled tight. Too tight, a man sat his horse near the gate, rifle resting easy across his lap. Another stood in the shade of a rock outcrop. They weren't nervous. That told Silus more than words ever could. He stopped where they could see him plain, hands low. Posture calm. This water doesn't belong to you, Silus said. One man smiled. It does today. Silus didn't argue. He waited. Men like this always talked eventually. Rail lines moving, the man said. Cattle contracts are coming with it. Silus nodded once. That fit. You choke the small ranches, Silus said, and there's more grass for you. The man shrugged. World works how it works. Silus turned and left. No threat, no show. He'd seen enough. Clara comes back, and they choose a side halfway back. He spotted the wagon pulled off near scrub. He knew it before he reached it. Clara sat inside, hands folded, jaw set. Deputy Wade stood nearby, talking too easy. Silus dismounted. You done with her? He asked. Wade smiled. Just keeping her safe. Clara met Silus's eyes and gave a small nod. That was enough. They didn't argue. Wade waved them on like it was courtesy. He did it because the town was watching now, and even a crooked deputy has to look clean in daylight. They rode together without speaking for a long stretch. The sun lined west. The land went quiet. You saw it, Clara said at last. I did. They're taking the water. Yes, and if they take that, Clara said, the rest follows. Silus glanced at her. She was young, but she wasn't blind. They stopped at a dry wash. Silus helped her down. Her hip still ached, but she moved steadier now. He handed her the canteen. You don't have to stay, he said. Clara drank, wiped her mouth, and handed it back. I didn't come all this way to run, she said. And that settled it. The final move, proof in the open. They crept toward the water later, not to fight, not yet to watch, to count rifles, to learn habits. A shout broke the quiet. Someone spotted them. A shot cracked the air, warning. Silus shoved Clara down behind a rock and returned fire once. Not to hit, just to say he could. The men scattered, cursing. They pulled back too fast to be brave. They didn't chase. Back at the ranch, Silus tended his shoulder in lamplight. Clara watched with the careful attention of someone who respects pain. You always do things this way, she asked. Slow? Silus smiled thin. I only look slow. Clara laid the letter flat on the table. I read it all, she said. There's more here, she pointed to a payment date. It lines up with the water claim, she said, and the rail contract. Silus studied it. She was right. They didn't just plan it, they timed it. They counted on people being tired, Clara said, and scared. Silus leaned back. The chair creaked. He'd tried being quiet. It hadn't worked. I can't stop them alone, he said. Clara didn't hesitate. You won't be. Outside, horses shifted. Men waited beyond the fence, testing. Clara stood beside him, not behind. Silus felt something shift, not fear, not anger, resolve. If water was the heart of this land, then that was where the truth had to surface. And when it did, everyone would have to choose. Hullbrook morning came quiet, too quiet. Silus stood on the porch with Clara beside him, both watching the road like it might answer a question neither had spoken out loud. She didn't lean on him this time, she stood on her own. You ready? Silus asked. Clara nodded. As I'll ever be. They rode into Hullbrook together, not fast, not hiding. People saw them coming and stepped aside, some out of fear, some out of respect, most out of habit. Silus laid the letter out on the counter of the general store where folks could see it. Names, dates, payments, and the rail clamped beside it like a nail in a coffin. Some leaned in, some shook their heads. A couple men muttered Silus was stirring trouble for attention. Silus let them talk. Pride is loud, proof is quiet. Then Clara stepped forward and placed the scrap of cloth beside the clamp. At that moment, Wade Kellen arrived. Clara held the cloth up near his coat sleeve. The town saw the match in color and weave without needing a lecture. Wade tried to laugh it off, but his laugh sounded thin. He reached for the paper like he could snatch truth back into his pocket. That's when the store owner blocked him. Not brave, just tired. Wade's eyes flashed. His hand drifted toward his holster. Silus didn't draw, he simply shifted his stance, and the room felt the difference. Outside, boots hit the boardwalk fast. Harlon Voss's men were coming, not to debate, to erase. A bottle smashed somewhere. The sharp smell of lamp oil rolled in with dust. They were going to burn the evidence and call it an accident, just like they called Clara's fall an accident. But the rumor had been real. A deputy marshal federal stepped into the doorway, badge plain, voice quiet, and that quiet hit harder than shouting. Wade stopped moving. Voss tried to smile like it was business, but business doesn't smell like lamp oil and fear. When one of Voss's men raised a rifle outside, a single shot cracked from the street high and clean. The rifle hit the dirt. No gore, no glory, just a lesson. The game had changed. By sundown, the water gate wasn't opened by one hero. It was opened by ranchers and town men who finally decided they were done being afraid. The water ran again, not because the world turned kind. Because enough people chose to stand where it counted. That night, people lingered in the street, talking low, laughing a little. Fear doesn't vanish, but it loosens its grip when someone stands up to it. Where it started and where it ends later, back at the ranch, Silus and Clara repaired the fence where she'd fallen. They replaced the wire with care, not too tight, not careless, the way it should have been from the start. I think this is where it started, Clara said. Silus nodded, and where it ends. They stood there a long moment, watching the sun slide down over the land, no rush. The house felt different that night, not full, just right. And now let me step out of the story one last time and speak plain. Most people aren't trying to be heroes. They're trying to live without regret. Silus didn't wake up wanting trouble. He woke up wanting peace. And sometimes the only way to get peace is to face what scares you instead of stepping around it. Because the trouble that ruins a person isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. You keep stepping around it, and one day you realize you've been practicing surrender. Strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like kindness that doesn't ask for credit. Clara didn't come west to be rescued. She came to decide who she would become. And that choice gave her more power than fear ever could. So ask yourself, what line would you refuse to let someone cross? What would you stand up for even if it made others uncomfortable? And who would you stand beside when it counted? Those questions don't belong to the past. They belong to today. If this story gave you something to think about, let me know in the comments. A simple like helps more than you think. And if you want more stories like this, consider subscribing, not for numbers, but for the conversations that happen when people still listen. Wherever you are right now, take a breath, look around, be grateful for the ground under your feet. Silus didn't win because he was the strongest. He won because he refused to lie to himself when it mattered. And tomorrow, decide one small thing you can do to live a little straighter. Because the truth is this, we don't always get to choose the world we live in, but we always get to choose the kind of person we are in it. And sometimes, that choice changes more than just our own life.